Dr. Marcus Webb stared at the quantum equations floating in the holographic display, his tired eyes burning from 14 straight hours of work. Around him, the sterile corridors of Research Station Kepler hummed with the quiet efficiency of a facility that housed the galaxy's most brilliant minds, none of whom were human. The Galactic Consortium had reluctantly allowed humanity into their scientific community 3 decades ago, more out of diplomatic necessity than respect. Humans were viewed as crude tinkerers, useful for manual labor and basic manufacturing, but hardly capable of contributing to the advanced sciences that governed faster than light travel, quantum manipulation, and consciousness transfer. Marcus was one of only 12 humans permitted to work in advanced research, and even then he was relegated to cataloging data and running simulations that the real scientists, the Altarians with their crystalline neural networks, the vegan collective consciousness entities, the hyper-intelligent Centauri biocomputers, already deemed worthless. Still playing with your primitive calculations, human? The voice belonged to Dr. Zix Thaler, a vegan researcher whose translucent body housed a collective of 1,000 merged consciousness. Her tone carried the casual dismissiveness that Marcus had grown accustomed to over the years. Just following up on some inconsistencies in the quantum foam data, Marcus replied without looking up. He'd learned not to explain his work too enthusiastically. The other researchers tolerated his presence, but had no interest in his insights. Zix Thaler's 1,000 voices laughed in unison, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Inconsistencies? Child, those calculations have been verified by minds far superior to yours. The quantum foam is perfectly understood. We mastered it before your species discovered fire. Marcus nodded politely and waited for her to leave. Once alone, he returned to his work, unaware that he was about to shatter 10,000 years of scientific orthodoxy with a breakthrough so simple that the galaxy's greatest minds had overlooked it entirely. The inconsistency he'd noticed was tiny, a 0.3% variance in quantum foam density measurements that appeared only when observed from certain reference frames. Every other species had dismissed it as measurement error, their advanced instruments too sophisticated to detect what was actually a fundamental property of space-time itself. But Marcus was using human-built equipment, crude sensors, that his supervisors had mockingly called stone knives and bearskins. These primitive instruments, designed with human intuition rather than mathematical perfection, detected quantum fluctuations differently than the refined alien technology. Where alien sensors filtered out noise, human instruments recorded everything. Where sophisticated algorithms smoothed out anomalies, human software preserved raw data. The very crudeness that made human technology inferior also made it uniquely capable of observing phenomena that advanced civilizations had programmed themselves not to see. As Marcus dug deeper into the data, a pattern emerged that sent chills down his spine. The quantum foam wasn't uniform, as everyone believed it had structure, rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. And if he was reading the data correctly, that heartbeat could be synchronized. 3 days later, Marcus stood before the consortium's governing council, a collection of the galaxy's most advanced beings assembled in the great amphitheater of New Alexandria. The Altarian prime crystalline, a mountain-sized entity of living diamond, regarded him with fractal patterns of light that conveyed profound skepticism. Human Webb, the crystalline's voice, resonated through every speaker in the chamber. You claim to have discovered a fundamental error in our understanding of quantum mechanics. This is amusing. Seated in rows around the amphitheater, representatives of 200 species observed the proceedings with barely concealed contempt. The Andromedan collective's bioships pulsed with bioluminescent laughter. The silicon-based Rigelians emitted harmonic frequencies that translated as mockery. With respect, Prime Crystalline, Marcus began. his voice steady despite the intimidating assembly. "I don't claim your understanding is wrong. I claim it's incomplete." He activated his presentation, and the amphitheater filled with holographic displays of his data. "You've all observed quantum foam as static, but my instruments detected temporal patterns. The foam isn't random, it's synchronized across vast distances, creating what I call quantum channels." The vegan collective's representative, a being that existed as pure, organized energy, flickered with what Marcus had learned to recognize as condescension. "Human, your primitive instruments are detecting equipment malfunction, not new physics." "Then explain this," Marcus said, triggering the next phase of his demonstration. The chamber's lights dimmed as a small device materialized on the central platform, a crude human contraption of metal and wire that looked like a child's science project compared to the elegant technology surrounding it. Marcus activated the device with a simple switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the device vanished. A heartbeat later, it reappeared on the opposite side of the chamber. The silence that followed was deafening. The Altairian prime crystalline's light patterns shifted to configurations that indicated profound confusion. The Andromedan bioships stopped pulsing entirely. Even the energy beings of the vegan collective seemed to flicker with uncertainty. "Impossible," whispered the Centauri biocomputer, its organic processing units struggling to comprehend what they'd witnessed. Instantaneous transportation without dimensional folding or quantum tunneling protocols. The energy requirements alone should have been massive, Marcus finished, according to current theory. But by synchronizing with the quantum foam's natural rhythm instead of fighting it, the energy cost is negligible. Like surfing a wave instead of swimming against the current. What followed was chaos. The assembled representatives erupted in cacophonous debate as the implications became clear. Instantaneous travel, without massive energy expenditure, would revolutionize everything: trade, communication, warfare, the very structure of galactic civilization. But more disturbing than the technology itself was its origin. A human, a member of a species they'd dismissed as primitive, had achieved what their greatest minds had declared impossible, using equipment they'd mocked as obsolete. Over the following months, the galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as humanity began to reshape the cosmic order. Human colonies, previously isolated by the enormous costs of interstellar travel, suddenly became interconnected in ways that made them major players on the galactic stage. The consortium's carefully maintained monopoly on advanced transportation technology crumbled overnight. Trade routes that had enriched alien civilizations for millennia became obsolete as human quantum tunneling devices allowed instant cargo transfer across the galaxy at a fraction of the traditional cost. But the real revolution came when humanity began sharing the technology freely. "Why?" demanded the Altairian prime crystalline during an emergency session. "Your species could dominate galactic commerce. Why distribute this knowledge?" Marcus, now representing humanity in the consortium's highest councils, smiled with the quiet confidence of someone whose entire worldview had been vindicated. "Because that's what humans do. We share. We collaborate. We build on each other's work." The alien representatives struggled to understand this concept. In their societies, knowledge was power, carefully hoarded and controlled. The idea of giving away a technological advantage was incomprehensible. Within a year, species across the galaxy were building their own quantum tunnel networks using human designs. But they quickly discovered that human technology required something their advanced civilizations had lost: intuition. The quantum foam synchronization couldn't be perfectly calculated. It required what humans called feel, an intuitive understanding of rhythm and timing that organic intelligence had evolved to possess, but artificial enhancement had programmed away. The Altairians, with their perfect crystalline logic, couldn't achieve the subtle timing variations needed. The Andromedan Collective's bioships, engineered for optimal efficiency, lacked the creative chaos necessary for quantum surfing. Even the vegan consciousness, despite its vast merged intelligence, couldn't replicate the individual spark of insight that made the technology work. They needed humans. Suddenly, the species that had been relegated to manual labor and basic manufacturing found themselves the most sought-after consultants in the galaxy. Human intuition, human creativity, human unpredictability, all the traits that had made them seem primitive became invaluable assets.
The balance of galactic power shifted dramatically. Species that had dominated through technological superiority found themselves dependent on human guidance. The careful hierarchies that had maintained order for millennia began to crumble as formerly inferior civilizations gained access to revolutionary capabilities. Marcus watched the transformation from his new office on Earth, now the unofficial capital of galactic research and development. Through his window, he could see construction crews, human and alien, working side by side, building the massive quantum tunnel array that would link Earth to every corner of the galaxy. "They still don't understand, do they?" asked Dr. Sarah Chun, his former colleague who now served as humanities science coordinator. "They think this was about the technology." Marcus shook his head, smiling as he watched a group of Rigelian silicon beings struggle to master the timing rhythms that a human technician was patiently teaching them. "No, they don't. They think we accidentally stumbled onto something they missed." "And we didn't? We did exactly what humans always do," Marcus replied. "We looked at something everyone else had figured out, and we asked, but what if we're wrong?" The greatest breakthrough in galactic history happened because we were too stubborn to accept that there was nothing left to discover. Outside, the quantum tunnel array hummed to life, its crude human engineering somehow achieving what the galaxy's most sophisticated technology could not. The revolution had begun not with superior firepower or advanced science, but with humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The consortium had underestimated humanity, assuming that technological superiority meant evolutionary superiority. They had forgotten that intelligence wasn't about having the right answers. It was about asking the right questions. And humans, it turned out, were very good at asking questions no one else thought to ask.